Well, I get to see these numbers today. I'd like to call the, this is a tool. Fun with the agent now. But I would.
And I would ask for approval of the minutes from the prior budget meeting. Moved by Supervisor Diamond, seconded by Supervisor Wild. Any additions or corrections? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, privilege of the floor. Anybody got any comments before we start? Okay. Well. On the agenda was the status of where each department is at this particular time. This includes the includes a 2.85% pay raise for everyone. It also includes the increase in health insurance. It includes the increase in retirement. It also includes the decrease in retiree health insurance. That's not in it. Okay. The CSEA 2.85 is not.
So we have to adjust the number, but
Well, that's
last page.
That's $700,000. That's approximately. About 5, okay. Minus the revenues, it's about 5. Well, if you turn to the back page, you can see that at this present time, the amount to be raised by taxes is up 15.66%, $7,581,000. The allowable tax cap for this year is now 2.64%, which is $1,260,621. Also in this budget, the sales tax is budgeted actual amount for 22, which was $70,464,584. That's a net gain to the county of approximately, and it's probably a little less than this, $2.9 million. $42,983,673 will go to the towns and village. I'll run down a list of additional expenses that I've put together here, and it doesn't include all of them, but these are the larger ones. First off is the New York State retirement. Has increased approximately $1.6 million. It's a little less because we got a $53,000 credit. So it's a little less than the number I got here. The Medicaid share that the county pays, the EF map was taken away by the state. That'll cost us $980,107 this year. In 24-25, that increases by between another $600,000 and $700,000.
Can I interrupt you for a second before you go on?
Yes.
The state and their decisions to do these increases, do you have a total summation of what the state is adding to our budget?
Not a total one, no. But I could calculate it.
I'm just curious in general, what they're doing with us.
Oh, there's 2.6 right there.
2.6, I think. Just under 3.
Yep. Right. That's next on my list. Is the indigent legal services. These are the attorneys that went from $75 an hour to $158 an hour. It's approximately $200,000. And it's not just the increase in cost, it's the pressure it puts on our other attorneys because they look at $158 an hour and they go, I'm not making that much. So, you know, we start getting assistant DAs and public defenders that start looking around for other jobs. There's a 2.85% salary increase in this budget, minus the CSEA. I guess he's not in there. The outer unit is approximately $400,000. I'm not exactly sure what the sheriff's total is, but the totals are there. So around that, 166,000 increase. The upstate SPCA, approximately 80,000. Juneteenth, about $130,000. The psychiatric, the 739 psychiatric exams, $250,000. Health insurance increased approximately $270,000. And overtime in corrections is up, increased by $300,000. Reductions in revenues, the additional mortgage tax is $1 million that went to the CDTA agreement for the buses. The county clerk's revenues, mortgage tax, clerk fees is down $500,000. The sale of property at the auction is a $275,000 reduction. Jail services has gone from $400,000 to $65,000. That's a $335,000 reduction. And public health. My estimate, again, it's not 100% this number, but it's around 700,000. We've been running short on revenue for several years now, and it's time to take care of that. So that's about $700,000. So that's about 2.8 million. There is some good news. The interest earnings estimated by the treasurer is up 660,000. And the retiree health insurance is down 8%. So that helps a little. Department requests are still within this budget. Our paving, increase in paving from 4 million to 5,348,000. That's a $1,348,000 request. Solid waste. There's several pieces of equipment at a cost of $648,000. And the Economic Development Corporation has requested $100,000. So they're all within there.
Right?
Yes.
Now, do you have a separate chart that you're reading from?
Yeah, my own.
Okay, okay. I see it. I see the 2023 adopted budget of 2024. But is there any way we could have a copy of it, you know, you're reading, because
What I got?
oh, you got it, okay. All right, because yeah, that would be helpful, but thank you.
You can have a copy of it.
Real tough to follow along, and, you know, so when I make the notes and stuff.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
All right.
We get some idea what page it's on in terms of the printout, that would, if you could find it.
There was no page.
There is no page, yeah.
So it's $100 million. That's okay.
No, so that being said, you know, there's not enough for the sales tax to make this work. Unless you want a 10 or 15% property tax increase, which I don't think anybody does. I did a little calculation this morning about the sales tax. Currently in 2023, we're at $55,442,000. If we get the same amount in the fourth quarter that we had got in 22, that's $16,500,000. That'll put us at $71,942,000. So when we have $70,464,000 in the budget, so that's not going to, unless you put it all in there, which I wouldn't recommend doing, but that's not going to solve the problem. So my plan is to work with the general fund balance with one-time expenses that the board will be able to work on as the year progresses in 2024. Our fund balance at the end of 2022 was about $30 million. And so far this year, as near as I can estimate, we've spent about $1.5 million, $1,559,000, somewhere around there, plus or minus, which leaves us with about $38,500,000. So if you subtract off the minimum that the treasurer would like to have on hand for cash flow, leaves us about $8,626,000. My guess as to what will happen at the end of 2023 in March or April, I would say that our fund balance will go from 38.6 back up to probably 40 to 42. I don't see why it shouldn't. The sales taxes, even if it holds steady, that'll bump it a couple million. The vacant positions and positions that haven't been filled, that'll add to it. And plus, the department heads never spend all the money that's budgeted. So I would say we'd be back 40, 41. Yeah. So what I would propose to do is go into the D fund. And there's a transfer there of for capital projects for the roads, and that amounts to $2,237,000 for 2024. In 2025, that goes down to about $640,000. So I would take the difference between the 2.2 million and the 640,000. And then I'll go into the airport where there's a local match of $230,000. And that goes down to 75,000 in 25. So I would take that difference. So that's 1,587,000 plus well, I took the whole 230. Anyways, plus the 230 gives me 1,827,000 that I will remove from 24 budget and wait until 2024 and appropriate fund balance to pay it. I would do the same thing if the board desires with the paving, the increase in paving, 1,348,000. I would do the same thing with the 648,000 of waste equipment. We'll do the same thing with EDC. The DM fund, the machinery, I would decrease that by $400,000 and request that the board appropriate $400,000 for the fund balance after the first of the year. The vehicle fund, I would decrease by $200,000 and ask that the board reappropriate it out of fund balance. And I would do the same with the indigent legal services at 200,000. Which gets us to approximately 4.7 million. And then I would also add in the 739 psychiatric exams at 250,000.
So what's the total out of the fund balance? So
If I add all that up, I would get about $5 million approximately. You know, it's not exact, but so I would propose that I remove $5 million from this budget. And if the board desires, which we would have to for the capital projects and the local match, but the rest of the stuff is all, except for the psych exams and the indigent legal services, is kind of discretionary. So other than that, I don't know, you know, how you want to do it.
what's the total budget? What's the total budget for the county for next year?
For next year, that hasn't been determined.
Well, based on your plan, right? It's based on this.
For this year, 2023 was 184 million. So if you add 7.5 to that, it's 91.5. So take off 5. You'd be down to about 186.
So fund balance, what's the recommended percentage of fund balance?
21.8 is the max, 16 is the min. Is that correct? Yes. 16.7 is the min, 21.8 is the max.
So 20%, right, about below the max, that would be about $40 million. So if we take the 5 out, we're still above.
Yeah, if it was so if you're at 40, you take 5, you'd be at 35.
35. I think that's right.
Is 35 out of 190. So
Other than that, you know, it's we just remove these things and don't do them. Which, you know, the board will get the vote on each individual item, which will make it harder for the department heads because everybody will focus on it, but that's the way it is.
my sense is that's why we had our fund balance. Plan for things that one planned for.
Right. But I guess is what I would say is that going forward, this is not gonna work. You know, you can't keep doing that every year because you're gonna run out of fund balance. And I don't want to put it into the budget because then you got to get it back out of the budget or come up with revenue. That's.
I got a question, Frank. Go back to the, on page, the sheriff's budget. He has two, he has the law enforcement budget and corrections. So he's requesting about $4,700,000 over 23.
Yep,
And
he sure is.
is that a practical request? Because it seems to me historically we have been taking monies out of the fund balance every year to balance its budget. How do we hold these department heads accountable for their budgets? I mean, some of the savings that you proposed, I agree with, but how do we stop them from coming back and asking for more money? How do we get them to sharpen their pencil?
Well, out of that 4.9, you would have to take off the, if you look up at the top of the page is contingent account, and there's 1.5 million.
That's down to 275.
That would come off in the sheriff's, because that was for salaries for the sheriff.
Okay.
So that's our, $1.5 million is already there.
It seems to be. What those two areas within the sheriff's department, and I'm not trying to be critical, seem to be what's driving a large amount of our increase in our budget.
There is.
I'm gonna work. Some,
$4.7 million. That's in law enforcement and corrections. And the call center, it looks like 217,000. But are these real numbers that we can hit, that they can? Or are we going to continue to balance the budget next year with fund balance because they can't hit these numbers?
Well,
I don't know what the answer is.
I would say that about 70% of that is probably salaries. So unless you want to lay people off, I don't know how you're gonna do it.
I'm not suggesting doing that. I'm just trying to figure out how we can curb some of these increases, specifically in that area. I know we have to provide, road protection, public safety is our number one priority. But the numbers just seem to be escalating rather quickly.
Well, again, when you talk about corrections, I hear it all year long that the overtime is way up and over. But then I look at the vacancy report and there's 10 vacancies.
Yeah.
So how is it up? It's up because somebody's not transferring the money out of regular salaries into the overtime. So I don't think we need to increase the overtime at all if there's 10 vacancies in the corrections department.
I see what you're saying.
Makes no sense. That's why it's always been at 200,000. But
we always heard from the sheriff about the corrections and we're not getting inmates from out of the area like we had in this past. So I'm not sure what that percentage is, but yeah, it does make sense. If we have all these openings and that's in the budget, what happens when you close them?
all right, then you shouldn't need as much overtime.
Right.
Is it a salary issue? Is it quality of work life issue?
I would have to stay to try to answer that question. It's a tough position, a tough place to work, difficult, just like the Greensboro Police Department, they're understaffed. They can't fill all the vacancies that they have. Nobody wants to come on board and do this type of work, and I think there's a high rate of burnout in corrections also. So, people just don't want to stay. It's not-
Well, especially when we're doing all that overtime.
Yeah,
Right, so this is, I remember this from years past, we've been talking about it, so. We don't have any plan to try to address this, whether it's salary increases, whether it's some type of way to attract,
Oh, we have increased your salary.
and I understand, right? And so this falls on the sheriffs. To fill this and figure out a plan.
Mr.
Some of
Chairman.
that was they weren't putting out the civil service test for correction officers. Now I think they the schedule is like twice a year now, I believe. That helps to get more people tested. The other thing is, if you remember right, Commissioner of Corrections comes in and says that if you need 13 people on a shift, that's what you gotta staff it, 13 people on a shift. There was no knocking one person off on a shift, to make it down to 12. We still are under the schedule that Commissioner of Corrections puts out for your jail. But a lot of the overtime is caused by the vacancies and keeping people. I don't know how many people's on the list, and then they gotta go through the agility and all that to get hired. It's catch-22. I don't know. A lot of people went to the state at one time. Remember? They transferred from local to the state. That's not. I don't know. I do know that testing was one of the problems. We couldn't get enough candidates. Testing at one time. I think they fixed a lot of it.
We still have what, 12 openings? What did you say?
10.
10 openings.
I counted 10 on the.
Right.
And you can't reduce them because they're mandated by the state correction department. So not like you can, yes, Mr. Bailey.
Yeah, so I'm looking at those three departments that Jack Diamond just talked about, the sheriff's 9/11, the sheriff's law enforcement, the sheriff's correction. So we're increasing approximately $5 million, which is almost a 20% increase over 2023. Now, I think we've identified the problem, which we've identified for a number of years, which is the fact that we've had continuing vacancies in that department. Henceforth, we then have a very large overtime number, okay? And that is one of the driving forces for the huge increase. But that's been consistent. We have that every year, almost, correct? I mean, am I wrong on that? That's been a consistent problem. So why would we? Just so I got my hands around this. So the reason why we have such a large increase request issue of 5 million, almost 20%, is because 70%, I believe you just mentioned, Frank, are the increase in salaries to those departments. So shouldn't that do a couple of things? Number one, it should increase our retention rate. Now we're paying much more for these individuals in the sheriff's department and so forth. So that should increase significantly our retention rate. That should also make us more than competitive for recruitment of new people to fill the 10 vacancies, okay? And then finally, that will equate to a significant decrease in the overtime hours. If A and B come to fruition, C then is the net result, which is a major reduction in overtime. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, if really, then we don't need to increase overtime. We need to just fill the vacancies, and with the now money allotted by this board of increases in their salaries, that should suffice. That should correct the problem going forward. Am I on target with that, or in your opinion?
We hope.
Yes, okay. Okay, so
corrections officers, that's where their big issue is, and in particular, female corrections officers. Getting people tested through the test, getting them through the agility test they have to take. They haven't had a lot of success, and they're having trouble recruiting people to do corrections. I mean, it's
so it's not a money issue so much, John. It's a
I think it's a combination of both. I think the money helps, but it helps retention. But we have to work overtime because we don't have enough positions filled. He's really having trouble getting positions in correction.
So again, the crux of the problem is we got to fill these 10 positions or additional positions in correction. We fill that, we get that objective accomplished. It'll alleviate and eliminate a number of other issues that are a result of that. Right? Yeah, the overtime goes like this. We now become staffing wise, fulfilling what the state requires in certain areas with this with the jails. And I know they tightened up the requirements, how many people have to be in per pod per minute or per hour and so forth. Okay, so hopefully, even if we accept this $5 million increase, if things come to the way they should, we won't be spending all that. That money will not be spent other than the 70%, which is into the personnel. Granted, so 70% of 5 million is 3.5 million. So 3.5 million will be spent. Basically, we'll probably be below that $5 million increase, anywhere from 1 to 1.5 million. So the county won't spend all that 5 million is my position. Am I correct on that, Frank, do you think, or?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
Where I think, wasn't that where you're saying we should be transferring money from salaries in to cover the overtime that.
Right. So the treasurer's office doesn't write it up every month.
So, you guys help me out.
Is that what it amounts to?
I've got to put somebody responsible to address this as a goal, right? So is it personnel? Is it the sheriff? Right? So what I'd like to do is see if we can figure out who's going to have the responsibility to come to our committees, whatever committee it is, to tell us what's going on with these openings so we can save possibly $1.5 million next year. So who do we look to?
I think.
This is the
I think
meeting.
I think that's what you're looking at.
So you're gonna report to personnel, you report to sheriff.
Report to public safety and also first personnel, I'd say.
So how long do you think it's gonna take you to get it done? Let's get those questions all the time.
Yeah.
Instead of, being told how long it's gonna take.
Maybe by the December board meeting.
Well, the search chief does that report every month,
Yeah, they do it every month.
report on their overtime compared to the period of time we hear.
Yeah, but we're talking about,
But I'm not talking about just completely about overtime, right? I want to, on what are we doing to fill these open positions? Right, and what are the challenges, so the board might be able to react to those challenges and find a way to help get it done.
let's shoot for the personnel, next personnel meeting.
Can someone help me get that on the agenda?
I think the county administrator can cover that.
Awesome. Thank you. We're John Spot. Sorry, John.
Frank, I got a
Yes, go ahead.
question under the airport. It looks like the revenue stream projected is down about 31,000 compared to last year.
Yep.
And the expense side is up about $200,000. What's driving that increase in expenses? Number one, and number two, I thought when we were getting into this solar arrangement, it was going to save some money.
Yeah, but that's not gonna come online and I think for another year.
Okay. So what's driving the expenses,
Uh,
the airport side going up that much money?
Well, one thing is there's $50,000 in there for technical equipment. For a 2 runway lighted X's. That we're gonna propose that he does this year.
Okay.
So that'll come out. Let's see, what else is it driving?
We're actually taking that to the board meeting this Friday.
So getting back to what you said earlier today, is that there's some line items you want to see adjusted,
Right.
and we're going to need to be cognizant of the fact that we might have to move monies from the fund balance and make those in the calendar year 2024.
Yeah, I'm estimating between $4.5 and $5 million of fund balance that we'd have to spend. And also in the contracts at the airport, there's $160,000 for Michael's Way, which is the road to the
Oh, yeah, that's right.
that's coming out.
Supervisor from Queensbury wanted to see if there was a revenue stream that we could be posted against that.
I didn't hear you.
The supervisor from Queensbury mentioned that he was looking for a revenue stream in order to help offset some of those expenses on Michael's Way.
What supervisor was that?
Brad brought it up, which was a reasonable request, looking for some revenue. Pay for that $1 million.
So there's 210,000 right there. Yes, Mr. McGowan.
Thank you. Frank, again, all your hard work that you do in this, really appreciate it. It's I can see that it's really mind-boggling sometimes and can bring out the best of us, but you really do a great job, and I've said that for years. One of the things that I've also been thinking about once hearing the increases and what we can do is really other ways the county can increase its revenues. Looking at different ways to increase, a simple way is maybe in the arrests. It's just reaching out there. We'll probably have to do laws, but I mean, if you're going to arrest someone and there should be a fee if they're found guilty. That the court doesn't get it, that it goes back to the sheriff. But I don't know, other ways of looking at it. One with the SPACA is registering some animals. Maybe a little increase in building permits For uses, I don't know, just creative ways. So I was gonna reach out to other supervisors of what we could do to help. Think of ways that we could increase revenue without increasing taxes. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Supervisor Bramer, sorry. I see you had your hand up.
Thanks. Just back on the discussion about the sheriff's department, I know it's a large increase of 5 million. I just wanted to bring up the point that if you look in the overtime report now, which is there are several individuals who are making 15,000, 20,000, even one person is making 30, no, a couple people are making $30,000 in overtime. You know, that might not be something that we want to see happening. It looks like it totals 1.2 million, if I'm correctly reading this report on overtime, the 3 different departments. But if you compare that to leaving in these 10 open positions or however many it is and funding those year after year and they don't actually get filled, it's not realistic to fill them, then maybe it's better to delete those extra unfilled positions and just let the people be doing overtime. If we know that they have to do the overtime in order to fill the positions, fill the slots for scheduling purposes. I mean, it just seems like a lot when we have 1.2 million in overtime, but somehow we are looking at a $5 million increase. I'm not sure where that other, 3.8 million is coming from, other than the union contract increasing personnel. And so that's one thing. On another point, I'd like to know where we are with personnel salary increases for anybody who's not in the union. I know that we did some actions this year, and is there anything in the budget built in for next year?
There's a 2.85% increase. And that's pretty much it for everyone except for the attorneys. The attorneys have the county attorney's office deleted a position, so they're still under budget or under last year's budget by $5,000-6,000. The district attorney received a grant and he's increasing his attorney salaries. And I think the public defender's office is also increasing theirs. So.
Okay, so I just heard that there were not any performance reviews happening with the department heads anymore. So I was concerned that we're giving people raises without any evaluations happening. That's not something I support at all.
No, 2.85. That's a.
Nobody else is getting anything else.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, and I think being creative about looking for additional revenues in a way that can keep down our real property taxes is really important. I had heard that Washington County was actually looking at increasing their sales tax. If that's a way to increase our revenue on people who have, more resources than others as they are spending on things that have sales tax in a way that can reduce our real property taxes on people who don't necessarily have disposable income, but have property that they own here in the county. I think I would support that. I think we should be talking to them about where they're going as well as with Saratoga, since we're the last 3 in the state with this 7% sales tax.
Right. Well, as I said earlier, this is not sustainable. You can't spend this much money and with the revenues we have, it's not going to work. I can make it work this year, but and going forward, it's not going to work.
Frank, and I do appreciate you proposing spending out of or using money out of the general fund. I've asked for that before to kind of lower our real property taxes, so I'm glad to hear it. 5 million is a lot. I still think we have up to 8 million without even getting near our top number of money in the general fund. So maybe we can even do more than the 5 million.
Well,
to help people and not increase our real property taxes.
you wouldn't want to spend all of it because you're going to want it in 25 and 26. I hesitate to put it into the budget because then you're committed to it and you have to have it the following year. If you appropriate it the way I've proposed, it's up to the board. If the board doesn't want to spend the money, they don't appropriate it. They don't vote for it. Frank,
do we have a new 5-year forecast? I can't remember the last time we did a 5-year forecast and had that. Do we have one?
It was last year we did the last one,
Okay.
but we don't. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, Frank, you keep saying that the way we're doing it is not sustainable. Maybe we ought to take a good hard look at increasing our sales tax. I think Kevin, the chairman, has mentioned, was it $26 million of new monies? If we went from 7 to 8%.
Yep.
I mean,
It's up there.
The gain for the county, 7 to 8% would be about $12 million after we pay out to the towns.
okay, $12 million. Well, that's $12 million.
Right.
New monies, knowing that Washington County is probably on the bubble of doing it. I'm not quite sure what Saratoga County does, but if you look throughout New York State, many counties are over 7% now. So I think we really need to have that discussion, a detailed discussion going forward, so we can help generate new monies coming in. I know people aren't comfortable with that dialogue, but I think it's something we've got to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. Mr. Wild.
Chairman, two things. I'm going to talk about the sales tax potential increase. It has a larger impact on lower income individuals because it takes a bigger chunk of their disposable income. So let's not forget that, right? I'm on a fixed income. It's going to take a bigger chunk out of me than when I was employed, gainfully employed. Right, so we need to be careful about that. But going backwards, I'm going to ask if we get some more clarification about the sheriffs and the transferring of money from overtime or from unfilled positions, not to overtime. Was he taking that money to?
I think he's just leaving it in the salary line, I would assume.
So I don't, it doesn't seem like the method that's typically used by other department heads. Sure if I'm onto something in that. But we told he isn't taking the money from the unfilled positions, which are in his budget, and he's not moving it to overtime.
Right, we position budget. This budget is done by the number of positions allocated to each thing. That's the way we do it.
Right.
We allocate money for unfilled positions every year. In your year, you end up should be taking money out of those unfilled positions and transferring in on your overtime. So I think people look at the report sometime and raise, concerns about the overtime, but really it's either going to come out of 0.1 to go into the 1.20, the overtime budget or not. So the way we do it, it's, we haven't even talked about DPW. DPW is down
Yep, they're the same way. They got
15 or 20 positions, and you got to follow the roads this winter. But I agree. I mean, maybe what we should do is you're either gonna reduce your overtime budget and take the money out of the 0.1s and transfer it in overtime sometime during the year when you exhaust the overtime budget. But then, people get excited about overtime, but they don't look at the regular salaries in each department. Say we're transferring from a 0.1 and moving it into an overtime. We all do it. We do it at our town too. If you have vacancies.
I guess I was confused by the comment that a budget officer mentioned earlier that this wasn't, I got the impression it wasn't being handled correctly, and maybe I'm wrong.
Well, don't they want us to wait till the end of the year, Frank?
not what the report says every month.
So that's our treasurer's report does report overtime cost. But basically what we've done in the past, and every year we have roughly 1.5 to $2 million in salary money that is not used because we have vacant positions. And in the end, we kind of that has evened out as we have adjusted the budget. And I'll look to our assistant treasurer back there. I think he's nodding his head, but I think that's what we do every year. So we haven't really, while we do highlight the fact that they're over budget by overtime, we assume in the end, it's gonna roughly, come out. And actually, there's more money returned to the general fund from salaries that are not expended after we paid the overtime. Covered the
Then
overtime.
why are we so much higher in this coming budget? Why are we 5 million more?
Well, again, it's not 5 million because we put 1.5 million in the contingent fund for this year to cover their salaries. So you'd have to reduce that 5 million by the 1.5 million. So it's actually 3.5. Yes.
Thank you, Frank. A question for the county administrator. Could we find is there a report available that shows us how much money rolls back into the fund balance out of salaries in the sheriff's department? So we could say, to your point, you're saying they're getting money back. That was your question. How much are they giving back on an annual basis? I'd like to know that. If in fact they are at all, or are they transferring the money from those accounts to other accounts?
They generally
There's
don't
got to
have
be a
the,
history of that.
they don't have the ability to transfer to other accounts out of the salary account without permission from the Board of Supervisors. And it has to go through the committee and the board.
And we have done that on a not a regular basis, but we've done that on several occasions through the calendar year, moving monies because something comes up.
Yep.
I'd like to know what gets returned at the end of the year, if in fact these positions are being budgeted and the money's now getting spent.
Yeah, and the treasurer does a closeout report at the end that kind of highlights that, so we could definitely identify that for you. And we won't, usually, Rob, that's usually about March of the year, I think, when you close out, March or April.
Yeah, the middle of April. When we close the books. So you can give you a history of prior years.
Could you do that? I'd like to see that, Mr.
And I should say that of that 3.5 million, probably close to 1 million of it is an increase in benefits, as far as retirement, Social Security, Medicare,
Right.
health insurance.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Beatty?
couple things. The number one reason why people leave New York State, which we have the most people leaving any state in the country, is because of taxes. Now, that's a fact. Okay, people can say, well, so that's on the list, but the number one reason why people leave is because we're the highest tax state in the country. So it's imperative that this county board do everything we can to make sure that we're not hoping to drive out our own residents out of the state. And so we, as a board, have done a fairly decent job over the years of keeping the tax rate below the tax cap. We've done a good job at that. Some years we've had to cut positions. Some years we've had to be even more creative than other years in finding revenue. But right now, with inflation off the charts, taxes more than ever have a huge impact on whether people want to live in one county or they don't want to live in one county. The county government can't be responsible, can't be accountable, isn't accountable for the taxes. They'll leave. They will vote with their feet. That's how the works. So I think that we, as a board, must do everything we can to make sure we're under the tax cap this year. And to me, we have a huge number in the general fund. As long as we fall within the parameters that this board set a few years ago, which is a 16.7 and a 21.8 minimum reserve and maximum reserve, I think we are doing our job correctly. If we fall within those parameters, if we fall outside those parameters, then we have to look again at maybe reducing things. But if we fall within those parameters and keep the tax rate below the tax cap, which is around 2.6%, I think we can say that we are doing what we can to maintain and retain residents in Warren County by being fair, open and honest and keeping their taxes at a bare minimum. That's what we need to do. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you presented a budget that falls within those parameters. If we use that money out of the general fund, which still keeps us where we're supposed to be anyway. Our general fund's fairly bloated, fairly heavy. So by taking that money out, we still fall within the parameters that the treasurer feels comfortable with. And then this board adopted a few years ago, the 16.7 and the 21.8%. So overall, I think I'm okay with this budget. I still have to go through the detail, but on its face value, keeping it under the tax cap is a fair and honest budget to the residents. If we go anywhere over there, I can't support it and I won't support it. But under it, I can support. So I appreciate the hard work you've done, Frank, on this. And I know it's never easy. And that's where I am on this. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Lynch.
Just want to point out, using fund balance, you have to be careful about using fund balance for recurring expenses. Because down the road, you're gonna have to fund those expenses at some point. And it has a doubling effect in following periods. So you can't just use, $8 million of fund balance to back the budget. It has to be one-time expenses. And I don't know if we're gonna be able to come up with one-time expenses that are going to get us to be below the tax cap. I mean, Frank had $5 million identified, which can be considered one-time costs. But even that will still would be 1.3 million over the tax cap. So we're still gonna have to find 1.3 million. Yeah, and I don't recommend using fund balance.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Well, we haven't addressed the 0.2s and 0.4s. Yes.
Just to remind everybody, 2,700,000 came from our friends in the state of New York this past year. The increases they put on us in retirement costs, FNAP, and changing the rate of pay for the legal defense people. That's $2.7 million. Whether it's lost revenue or increased expenses from the state of New York. And those three items, there's just three items.
And it increases next year with additional cuts. It increases next year with additional cuts to the Medicaid.
Right, but I'm just talking about this year. So you're behind the 8 ball, 2.7 million based on what the state of New York.
Frank, yes, along the revenue side, I may have missed it earlier, but public health, it's kind of like in the middle.
Yeah.
It goes from almost $10 million to 8.2, so we're losing like $1.8 million out of revenues for public health. And I'm just curious if you have some insight in terms of what the state's doing is there. I think you mentioned that earlier about what the state is doing to us.
Well, that's been when the state let the other nursing companies in here, the charge decreased ever since, and that's been over the course of 6 years, 7 years probably. So the revenue keeps falling off, and we've never really addressed it. We've kind of left it there, and hope that we would get it, but we're not getting it. So we're just kind of fooling ourselves. It comes off fund balance anyways.
Public health deficit always does it.
Or off what they didn't spend, or it comes out of the general fund, one way or another. So I just think it's time to, and public health, the director agrees that it's time that we take care of it and address it. And get it budgeted to where it's approximately where it should be.
And is that what we're doing now in terms of the revenue?
I feel we are, yeah. Or we're getting closer. Yes, Mr.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. The county clerk, can you explain why our revenues are down significantly?
Yep, she reduced the mortgage tax. Let me find it there.
CDTA, $1 million, right?
It's somewhere between 800, looks like it's gonna be close to about 750, I think, this year. Mortgages, new mortgages are down. It might go up to 1.2. We've, it fluctuates, the additional mortgage.
So the $1 million, John or Frank, that we now have said we're gonna send to Albany. Obviously, that's a loss of revenue for the county clerk's office. Obviously, that's a loss of revenue for the county, which I was against. We talk about how we're fighting for money and so forth, and we're gonna spend $7 million of mortgage tax. Which I'll probably vote against this week, because why should we increase taxes on people in Warren County and then send the money to Albany? But that's a whole other issue for another day. That doesn't make a lot of sense to Doug Beatty, but whatever. So the county clerk is down in revenues almost, you're saying between 800,000 and maybe go up to $1.2 million. Is that correct, John? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, the additional mortgage tax has fluctuated between 750, 800,000 to up to about 1.2. At one point, it was 1.4. That was an anomaly year, I think.
Well, 1.5.
We've been collecting this since 2011.
Yeah, so let me ask you this question though. What if the board votes Friday? Not to allow the mortgage tax to be, it doesn't go through, it's against the mortgage tax. How does the Albany, which is the Capital District Transportation Authority, they're counting on that, our mortgage tax, the Warren County mortgage tax. What happens then if this board says, we're not going to pass a mortgage tax? And the money that you think you're gonna get, does the county still have to cough up that money? Because it's not there. What if it's voted down?
I think we've already agreed to do that. haven't we?
Already agreed that.
If the tax is voted down, that the county will fulfill that?
No, we agreed to pay CDTA.
Well, but CDTA only gets the money of the mortgage tax. That's how I read
I
it.
don't think so. I think you've committed to paying them and you're gonna pay them. I think that's the mechanism that they've used in that,
They use that, they use a lot, correct?
but
Mortgage tax.
I don't think if we vote down mortgage tax that we get out of paying. I don't think that'll.
I don't believe that's true. I'd have to turn to the county attorney on that. If it's voted down, we are no longer collecting the mortgage tax regardless. So we would not be collecting that 0.25. And we'd have to go back down to the state again at the next legislature and get sponsorship to add an additional mortgage tax. So
That doesn't make sense.
It's an amount, our agreement is an amount
yeah,
equivalent to.
It says that in the contract.
It's, the agreement is
I didn't see
an
that.
amount equivalent to the percentage of mortgage tax. It doesn't, there's nothing that says it has to come from the mortgage tax. That's just the mechanism that everybody uses to collect that money, is that additional mortgage tax. So if that doesn't go through, we won't collect that revenue, but we'll still owe an amount, a percentage of mortgage tax to CBTA because we're in agreement.
Right, remember we tried to bring the idea of using occupancy tax to pay the amount equivalent to our mortgage tax.
So,
That didn't go anywhere.
okay, so that is why the county clerk's office though. Is the revenues budget so less, the revenue is such a lower number.
That's part of it. Yep.
It's the other part.
The other part is the mortgage tax itself. Has gone down $350,000 and also clerk fees has gone down 150.
Okay, so in our automobile fees and so, automobile collection and so forth,
That's
fees,
the auto use tax is consistent at 475. So that's stayed the same. She didn't raise it. I might tweak them a little bit, but
I mean, is that an actual, Frank, or is that her budgeting?
no, this is the budgeting.
Okay, so
I'd have to look, see what the actual was.
okay. Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Lynch.
As far as the county clerk revenues, that additional mortgage tax, that's budget is in there, but it's offset by $1 million of expenses. So the decline in the revenues has the factor of the mortgage, the regular mortgage tax declining and the county clerk fees declining. But the additional mortgage tax revenue, but it's budgeted.
Right, it's there, but it's just, it's going to somewhere else. Yes. Mr. Diamond.
Thank you, Frank. Getting back to the county clerk's budget, 2023. The expenditure side was 1,300,000. 2024, they're proposing 2,344,000. That's $1 million increase in expenses. What is relative to that $1 million increase in expenses?
That's the CDA.
Part of it is that $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mr. McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Diamond does bring up a good point here on looking at the funded vacant positions, along with the sheriff's department. I was thinking maybe we should get that across all the departments. I know DPW is down, I know health is down, I know social security is down. And you put all those together, that might be a large sum of money that, you know, is all budgeted. But they've been unfulfilled for, you know, the last year. So it might give us a little better feeling of being able to, you know, take a chance on a few things, I would say, to keep that money down. Just a thought I had, because I know we have a lot of vacancies and we've seemed to have them for a long period of time now, and I think everybody's kind of working to adjust, working with a smaller group, but it was just a thought I had of being able to see that figure over the last couple of years of what has been left over that went back into the general fund, as what we don't see here as a, you know, as a revenue or anything.
Right.
But you know, an unspent expenditure.
Thank you, Frank. On those same lines, if we're going to make adjustments to budgets through the calendar year 2024 to keep the expense side down, we can do that with these vacancies that we're funding. And when a department has a vacancy filled, we then appropriate the monies to do that, and we take the monies that are appropriated for these positions. Now they're not getting filled. We put it back into the general fund, and we treat that as we would treat any other request from a department head through the calendar year. I like that idea. I think that makes sense. I think they need to come to us and make a request and be able to demonstrate the need for it. But keeping these monies in these line items that aren't getting filled, I think we can reduce the cost of taxpayers by putting that back into the fund balance. Same thing. Maybe something we want to consider filling, you know, although it's going to take a little time, but we'll have a little bit more control over how the money's being spent.
Yep.
I think you've done a good job on the budget.
It's a thought.
You know, you put a lot of work into this. You've done a good job. You always keep the taxpayers in mind. But I do think the approach that you're proposing by funding some of these things, taking the money out now and making them come in and request the monies and demonstrate the need, we could do that with these positions that are being funded that aren't getting filled. That's my last question.
Yep.
Or comment.
Good. Anything else?
I don't have anything more.
I'm good right now.
You need a vote for us to move to
Nope. We'll probably have another meeting before
Okay.
the tentative meeting.
you're gonna find more revenue.
Well, again, I haven't addressed the 0.2s or the 0.4s, so there's probably
Can you
another
give us that history?
$1 million.
Instead of going back to the fund balance. Sheriff and other departments, So we know that. I keep looking at the sheriff's department, but all the other departments and find out how much money's been returned.
Any other comments from anyone?
Money in. Good job.
Adjourn, through adjourn. Mr. Reynolds, seconded by Mr. Diamond.